Nothing reveals a person's true nature faster than your absence. The moment you walk away, the illusion shatters. People like to believe they hold some level of control over you, your time, your emotions, your loyalty. They build their sense of security on the assumption that you will always be there. When you leave, that foundation collapses, and they are forced to confront an unbearable truth. You were never theirs to begin with. Cognitive dissonance. The mind rejects what it cannot control. Most people do not handle unpredictability well. They crave control, even in relationships, often without realizing it. When you break away from their expectations, they experience a psychological rupture, a deep contradiction between the person they thought you were and the one who chose to leave. They will rationalize your departure, convincing themselves you were unstable, ungrateful, or selfish. It is easier to blame you than to consider that their behavior may have driven you away. They will attempt to pull you back through guilt, nostalgia, or even hostility. They need to restore their own sense of power. If all else fails, they will rewrite the past, distorting memories to make themselves the victim and you the villain. This protects their ego from the uncomfortable reality that you chose to live without them. Loss of power. People never valued you, only what you provided. Love, friendship, loyalty, these words are often illusions for hidden transactions. People rarely value others for who they truly are. They value them for what they offer: validation, attention, emotional labor, security. Your presence was a source of comfort for them, something they depended on without realizing. The moment you take that away, they panic, not because they miss you, but because they miss what they extracted from you. If someone's world crumbles because of your departure, it was never love, it was possession. The fear of replacement. Your absence exposes their own insignificance. Nothing terrifies the human ego more than irrelevance. If you can walk away, it means they were never essential. That realization breeds resentment. They will scramble to find a replacement, not because they need someone, but because they cannot stand the thought of being alone with themselves. They may pretend they never needed you, flaunting their indifference in an attempt to convince both you and themselves that they remain unaffected. Deep down, however, they know the truth. Your departure forced them to face their own emptiness. The dark truth. Most people never appreciate you until you're gone. People do not reflect when things are comfortable. It is only when faced with loss that they begin to understand what they had. But by then, it is too late. Regret sets in, but not because they truly see you for who you are. They regret losing their control, their comfort, their illusion of permanence. They may try to reach out, not to reconnect, but to reclaim the power they lost when you walked away. The tragedy is that most people only learn to appreciate others in absence, not in presence. Walking away does not make you cruel. It reveals who people really are when they can no longer use you. People don't react to your departure with sadness. They react with ego. When you walk away, their initial shock mutates into something far more insidious: projection, blame, and resentment. They cannot accept that you left by choice, so they rewrite reality. You become the betrayer, the problem, the one who was flawed all along. Not because it's true, but because it's easier than confronting their own inadequacies. Blame shifting. They make you the villain to protect their ego. People would rather destroy your reputation than admit they were the reason you left. The narrative changes. Instead of you leaving for your own growth, they paint it as abandonment, selfishness, or cruelty. The blame intensifies if your departure exposes their weaknesses, if your absence highlights their toxicity, insecurity, or manipulation. By making you the villain, they reclaim a sense of superiority. They need to convince themselves they were right about you all along. They will spread distortions about you, not necessarily to harm you, but to convince themselves they were never at fault. The alternative, accepting that they were part of the problem, is simply too unbearable. Projection. They accuse you of what they are guilty of. People are rarely self-aware enough to own their flaws, so they displace them onto others. If they were emotionally unavailable, they will say you were too distant. If they were manipulative, they will say you were unpredictable. If they were selfish, they will say you only cared about yourself. In their mind, you didn't walk away for a valid reason. You became the enemy who needed to be punished. Manipulation and guilt tripping, the final attempt to pull you back. Some will not let you go so easily. They will try to make you feel responsible for their pain. After everything I did for you, This is how you repay me. You're going to regret this. No one else will care for you like I did. I thought you were different. I guess I was wrong about you. These are not expressions of love or loss. They are desperate attempts to regain control. If guilt works, they win. If anger works, they win. Because as long as they can trigger a reaction from you, they are still influencing your emotions. Resentment and spite, when they realize they've lost control. Once they see that you are truly gone, the final stage sets in, resentment. They will pretend you never mattered, to themselves and to others. They will lash out in passive-aggressive ways, trying to get a reaction from you. If you succeed without them, it will burn them more than anything, because your happiness is proof that they were never essential. At this stage, it is no longer about you. It is about their wounded pride. You were never just a person to them. You are a reflection. When you walk away, you do more than remove yourself from someone's life. You take away the role you played in their reality. You were the supporter, the listener, the validator, the one who absorbed their emotions without hesitation. Without you, they are forced to confront something they spent years avoiding, who they are when no one is watching. And for most people, that realization is unbearable. Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Hell is other people." But the truth is darker than that. Hell is what remains when people can no longer use others as distractions from themselves. The silent judgment, why your absence feels like condemnation. Most people will not admit it, but they rely on others to define themselves. Your presence reassured them, kept them comfortable, gave them something to focus on other than their own inner emptiness. They never actually valued you as a person. They valued the way you made them feel about themselves. They assumed you would always be there, because they never considered the possibility that you had a choice. When you leave, it is not just loss they feel, it is exposure. Your absence becomes a mirror, one that reflects all the flaws they used you to avoid seeing. To them, your departure is not just an event, it is an accusation. They interpret it as a judgment, an unspoken confirmation that they were not worth staying for. And that thought is something they cannot tolerate. The collapse of control, when they realize you were their stability. There is a cruel irony in relationships. Often, the one who is taken for granted is the one holding everything together. You were their emotional anchor, the one who steadied them, who provided reassurance, who gave meaning to their existence. They mistook your patience for permanence. They believed you would always be there, that no matter how much they drained you, you would never leave. Now, without you, they are left with the weight of their own instability. And for the first time, they realize that everything they relied on was never truly theirs to begin with. Sartre believed that we define ourselves through others. But what happens when the person you used to define yourself is gone? Most people never prepare for that answer. Desperation and replacement, the search for a new emotional supply. The moment you walk away, they will try to replace you, not because they want someone new, but because they cannot bear the silence you left behind. They will seek out a new source of validation, someone to play the role you once did. They will pretend to move on effortlessly, hoping you see them and regret your decision. But deep down, they know the truth. No replacement will ever feel the same. Because it was never just about you. It was about the unique way you made them feel. And that is something they will never find again. Most people will never tell you these things. They will sell you illusions of closure, of happy endings, of people who will one day wake up and realize their mistakes. But the reality? Some people never learn. Some people never change. And some people will never deserve another chance. If you want more of this level of raw, unfiltered psychological insight, subscribe now, because the truth is rarely pleasant, but it is always necessary. The moment you set boundaries, you stop being their ally and become their adversary. People only respect boundaries when those boundaries do not inconvenience them. The moment your self-respect interferes with their expectations, they view it as an attack. Not because you've done something wrong, but because they can no longer exploit you. Walking away is the ultimate boundary. It is the unspoken declaration that you will no longer serve as an emotional dumping ground, a source of validation, or an object of control. And that realization enrages them. The selfishness paradox. They call you selfish for choosing yourself. People expect loyalty, but what they really mean is obedience. They expect you to stay, to forgive, to tolerate, no matter how much it drains you. The moment you stop sacrificing for them, they brand you as selfish. You were useful when you absorbed their negativity, when you put their needs first, when you ignored your own discomfort for the sake of keeping the peace. The moment you prioritize yourself, you are no longer kind, loyal, or understanding. You are now selfish, arrogant, or heartless. But the truth is simple: they never respected you. They respected what you could do for them. When people call you selfish for setting boundaries, what they really mean is, how dare you stop letting me use you? Punishment through isolation, the silent retaliation against your independence. Most people do not lash out directly. That would require admitting that your absence affects them. Instead, they punish you in more subtle, insidious ways. Social exclusion. The same people who once claimed to care for you will suddenly go silent, ignoring you to reassert dominance. Smear campaigns. They will rewrite the narrative, turning you into the villain in their story to justify their own inability to keep you in their life. Performative indifference. They will go out of their way to prove that your departure meant nothing, often by flaunting their new relationships, friendships, or successes. This is not strength. This is desperation disguised as confidence. If they truly didn't care, they wouldn't need to prove it. The reality of power, walking away, is the ultimate power move. Most people assume power is about control, but true power is about detachment. When you walk away without looking back, you do something that most people fear. You show that you do not need them. You prove that they never had power over you, only the illusion of it. You force them to live with the consequences of their actions. And that is the deepest cut of all. Not your anger, not your confrontation, but your absence. Indifference, the one thing they cannot tolerate. Hate is not the opposite of love. Indifference is. And nothing terrifies the human ego more than the realization that someone who once cared now feels nothing. Anger means they still have an effect on you. Sadness means they still hold emotional weight in your life. But indifference means they no longer exist in your world. That is why they lash out. That is why they attempt to smear you, manipulate you, or replace you. Not because they want you back, but because they cannot stand the idea of becoming irrelevant. And yet, that is exactly what they are. When you walk away, some relationships evolve. Most simply die. We are taught to believe that meaningful relationships can withstand time, distance, and personal growth. That if a bond is real, it will adapt. But reality is far harsher. Most connections are built on convenience, not depth. When you remove yourself from the equation, you force the relationship to stand on its own. And for many, it collapses under the weight of its own emptiness. Selective amnesia, how quickly they forget you. The people who once swore they could never replace you will do exactly that. Not because you were meaningless, but because accepting loss requires emotional depth, and most people lack it. They will rewrite history, erasing your significance so they do not have to confront the void left behind. They will act as though your presence was incidental, as if you were just another passing face in their life. And they will expect you to do the same. They want to believe that if they can forget you, then surely, you have forgotten them too. But the truth is not about forgetting. It is about pretending. The convenience test: if it's not easy, it ends. Most relationships survive because they are convenient. When you remove the ease, the proximity, the routine, the mutual benefits, the connection is exposed for what it truly is. Real bonds survive difficulty. They adapt, adjust, and endure the discomfort of change. Superficial bonds dissolve the moment they require effort. If maintaining the relationship is no longer effortless, they simply let it die. Many will not even fight for the connection. Not because they don't care, but because caring requires work, and most people are unwilling to exert themselves for anything that does not serve their immediate needs. It is not that they wished for the relationship to end. They just didn't care enough to keep it alive. How people justify letting you go. No one wants to admit that they abandoned something meaningful. So, they create narratives that absolve them of responsibility. We just drifted apart. No, they chose not to hold on. Life got in the way. No, they prioritized everything else over you. People change. Yes, but real connections evolve with that change. What they mean is, I did not value this enough to fight for it. And that is the unspoken truth. People do not lose what they truly value. They only lose what they allowed to slip away. Some will return, not out of love, but out of emptiness. There will be those who try to come back, not because they miss you, but because they miss what you provided. They are not reaching out for you, they are reaching out to fill the void you left. They assume you will still be there, unchanged, waiting, ready to serve the role they once assigned you. They do not acknowledge the pain they caused, only the discomfort they now feel in your absence. And when they realize that you have moved on, that you are no longer affected, that their words no longer hold weight, they will disappear again, this time with resentment. Not because they cared, but because they lost their power over you. The greatest insult is not leaving. It is thriving after you leave. People do not truly fear abandonment. They fear irrelevance. When you walk away and crumble, they feel justified in believing that you needed them. But when you leave and succeed, you deliver an unspoken message. They were never essential to your survival. That is the ultimate betrayal. Not your departure, but your indifference. Why they hate your silence more than your anger. If you were still angry, still hurt, still seeking closure, it would mean they mattered. It would mean they left a mark on you, that they still exist in your world. But silence, indifference, that is what breaks them. Anger keeps them relevant. It means you still care enough to react. Sadness means they had power. They meant something if they could still cause you pain. But when you feel nothing, that is when they realize they were never as important as they believed. Silence is the one thing they cannot manipulate, argue with, or use against you. It is the quiet confirmation that they are no longer part of your reality. The truth about closure, you don't owe it to anyone. People demand closure not because they need it, but because they want one last moment of control. They want to twist the narrative, to ensure they are seen as the victim. They want reassurance that they were significant, that they mattered to you. They want to say their final words, not to bring peace, but to leave a lasting imprint on your mind. Closure is often a lie. It is a desperate attempt to hold on to something that should have already ended. And the harshest truth, you do not owe anyone an explanation for choosing yourself. They will watch, even if they pretend not to. The people you walked away from will claim they do not care. They will act as if your departure meant nothing. But behind closed doors, they watch from a distance, searching for proof that your life is worse without them. They convince themselves that you will regret leaving, because the alternative, that you are better off without them, is too painful to accept. And when they see that you have moved on, that you have built something without them, their last shred of control vanishes. Nothing haunts people more than the realization that they were not necessary, that their absence did not destroy you, that they were just another chapter in a story that continued without them. Final truth, some people never deserved access to you in the first place. The greatest deception is that everyone in your life belongs there. The harshest reality is that most were temporary, and many never deserved a place at all. Walking away is not weakness. It is not cruelty. It is simply the moment you realize that your presence was a privilege, not a requirement. And once you understand that, you stop explaining, you stop defending, you stop waiting. You simply leave. And never look back.